Welcome back to the BetCanada channel. Katie Caldwell, Jeff Lloyd here with you. We continue our division preview series. So, Jeff, let's get into the NFC North. I think there's a world where three of these four teams could make the playoffs. This is a really fun division. Who do you have at the top?
I would probably stick with, where Detroit is, from what they did last year. And I think a lot of people want to talk about Detroit and basically the way it all crashed against Washington in the playoffs. Detroit was at the point basically signing guys off the street. I mean, they went through a lot of injuries, lost a lot of significant pieces, and the thing for me is you knew it was a team that wasn't like there's some of these teams where just grasping and holding on, where you see this thing for Detroit where it's probably going to be a sustainable product for a while.
Yeah.
The way certainly built on the offensive side of the ball, certainly built on the defensive side of the ball. So everybody else has got to basically raise their game, and
Mhm.
have certainly some questions. We'll get to Minnesota, because I think everybody just seems to anoint JJ McCarthy, but we have actually yet to actually see him play.
Yep.
But I think for right now, you look at the way Detroit's structured, really, really comfortable in their own skin, got solid playmakers, game breaking players on the offensive side of the ball. They're a really, really tough out week in and week out.
Are you concerned, like, about all the turnover, like losing their OC, their DC, a ton of that staff? They still have a question mark at center with Frank Ragnow, the unexpected retirement. Like, their offense in particular is still loaded. Do we see regression, or are you just not worried about those changes under the Dan Campbell system?
I think you have to account for it. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
You have to
Yeah.
believe, that until you see it, it's the old line from A Few Good Men. It's not about what I think, it's about what I can prove. Until
Mhm.
we see it, we obviously have to list it as a question. But Tate Rutledge drafted in the second round. So obviously the Frank Ragnow news, as much as it was maybe a surprise to the NFL world, obviously I think Detroit kind of had an idea that this was a
Mm.
possibility, something that could certainly happen. And you want to applaud players for understanding that, hey, maybe the risk is just too much. And where is my life going to be 10 years from now, as opposed to just one more season of doing this? It's certainly a question, again, something you
Yeah.
have to worry about. But I think, again, that the Lions are just so comfortable in who they are. And whether they get up big, whether they get down by a lot, you just find a way to plug in and just continue to, go for it for 60 minutes. And, with the ability to create turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, having a couple of guys on the offensive side of the ball that can score from any point on the field, you just, think, and it's weird thinking about the Lions in this breath, but the Lions are one of the most consistent products in the NFC right now, and I just don't know if I see it changing anytime any soon.
So let's move into the Vikings then, because you touched on them. We finally do get to see JJ McCarthy. Major changes up front and defense. This is a good roster. Does it all come together with JJ McCarthy, especially coming off that injury?
I think it is obviously the biggest question because,
Yeah.
the little bit that was seen of JJ McCarthy last year, it was very promising, but the whole thing kind of went down kind of weird. It was, more of, oh, McCarthy is going to have, and literally what they said is, he's going to go in Thursday. They're going to get
Mhm.
into the knee. He could be out a couple of weeks or he's out for the season, which was such a it was all or nothing. You know what I'm saying? As far as what was going on with McCarthy. So obviously it changed the landscape of the Viking season, but it didn't change it in a way that anybody all of a sudden was, foreseeing, I would guess. I think we all thought, oh, well, Minnesota maybe is going to have a rough patch, but they're in a good position. They think they have their quarterback of the future, could end up with maybe another top 10 selection. And all of a sudden, maybe Minnesota is locked and loaded to go here for a while.
Mhm.
The Sam Darnold, scenario with Minnesota went on to a fantastic year. But you have to think that's probably going to add to the pressure of JJ McCarthy this year. I mean, it's enough pressure as it is,
Yeah.
first time starter, highly touted rookie last year. But most of the time when rookies walk into a position where they finally get the starting job, the team wasn't very successful.
Mhm.
So for McCarthy, that is certainly something that's going to be different. Look, the weapons are obviously there. Aaron Jones, a proven running back, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, all solid, solid playmakers. So it's just going to be, for McCarthy, I think the biggest thing for JJ McCarthy is going to be you can't get this team to the playoffs in week one. And like, don't try to just get it all in and say, look, I am the guy. I was going to be the guy. Get in there, get comfortable. The team, as we know, as it is constructed outside of the quarterback position, is a good team. So
Mhm.
don't try to play over your head. Do in there, take what is available. You have enough playmakers that this shouldn't be a team that drops out of the playoffs just because Sam Darnold moved on, which obviously makes all the sense in the world for Sam
Yeah.
Darnold. Just, play within yourself, and for JJ, winning a national championship in Michigan certainly helps. You're just trying not to, basically rock the apple cart in here, get in here, do what you're capable of doing. And
Mhm.
it should be, an absolute recipe for success for the Vikings.
Quick pause. If you haven't subscribed to the BetCanada YouTube channel, you can do so below. It's free and it helps support our channel so we can keep bringing you NFL and NHL content. Now, back to the show. And how about the Packers? Because they had a strong season last year, but their biggest problem, they went 1-5 in the division. I'm having a lot of fun watching the Jordan Love era, and I'm really glad that they finally drafted a receiver in the first round. Finally. What's your read on the Packers this season? I could kind of see them slotting a few different places here.
The Packers are interesting, and the fact that you brought in Matthew Golden, and for me,
Mhm.
Matthew Golden was a guy that was so impressive during the end of college football last year that I think he actually ended up maybe going higher than I anticipated. The fact that he ended
Okay.
up breaking the first round. I mean, it was really only 1 year production at Texas. He had been in Houston prior, but made the jump obviously in competition, better quarterback play. Certainly a great move for Matthew Golden, which led to his first
Mhm.
round selection. They are deep, certainly at the wide receiver position. Josh Jacobs is just one of those guys. And I think the thing I am most impressed with Josh Jacobs is he just doesn't miss time. Week in, week
Yeah.
out, Josh Jacobs is in the lineup every day, playing obviously the most physical position in all of the NFL. Now, Jordan Love, I couldn't agree with you more. I think when he was first selected, everybody just was kind of all right, well, and similar to when Rodgers is, you drafted him, but when are we actually going to see him? And those
Yeah.
things, we use the term in sports. Those things usually have a tendency to work themselves out,
Mhm.
and it certainly did. Now, and love has never been the issue. What I do get concerned about with Green Bay a little bit is, you know, they get in these games sometimes, and they're usually within all their games.
Yeah.
It's, where's the playmaker on defense? You know what I'm saying? They do not have, there's not that one pass rusher. And we talked about this, I think, with the Buffalo Bills. Where is that fear of God pass rusher, late in the game who can just
The game
destroy a
breaker.
drive?
Yep.
Their secondary, has some questions. They think they maybe have answers to them. But again, it's a question of, proof versus belief. But Green Bay and, the thing was the 1-5
Mm.
because, how do you change that? Because, look, Detroit, we still think is going to be very good. Minnesota, McCarthy doesn't have to play lights out for them to be as successful as they were last year. That
Exactly.
1-5, but if you look at it, if that was now 3-3 or that was 4-2, it
Mhm.
completely changes the landscape of the entire Green Bay Packers season in 24.
Mhm. How about the Bears? Ben Johnson stays in the division, which was really interesting to me. We see year 2 of Caleb Williams, which I'm really excited about. They upgraded that O-line, particularly in the interior. They're doing what they can to give themselves a chance, especially in such a tough division. What do you see the ceiling being for the Bears this year?
The Bears, now, this was always the issue with it last year. And now this is one of the biggest things that goes on with NFL teams and drafting quarterbacks early. If you're not a brand new regime, how does it all work out? And,
Mhm.
that Bears regime, the way it was constructed, before the drafting of Caleb Williams, they were all kind of basically, on a wooden bridge that was missing some strings and screws and hanging together. So in that situation, if things don't go great with the rookie quarterback, obviously after 1 year, they're not going to move on from the quarterback. They're going to move on from the people around the quarterback. So Caleb Williams now goes into another new system. Yeah, I think he's gonna be a lot better off in this system than he was in the
Yeah.
system last year. But it was also the other thing, though, like you mentioned, the interior. Caleb Williams is a guy, if it's not going to get done from the pocket, it's going to get done outside of the tackle zone. So you
Right.
have to make sure he's not dealing with interior pressure on an immediate basis, kind of like he was. I also feel for Caleb Williams. I think his play was underrated last year. And that may not necessarily been the Bears' fault or necessarily Caleb Williams' fault. It was just that it was such a deep quarterback class overall. And pretty much most of them in the first round had a pretty good amount of success and obviously better success than the Bears did overall. I think for them, though, the ultimate test is going to be the defense.
Mm.
The Bears look like they're equipped offensively to put up points. But again, being the difference between a good team and a great team is you got to shut somebody down at
Yes.
some point. whether it's early and play with the big lead or whether it's late and make a game defining play. And, with the way the Bears are currently constructed, two additions on defense. Grady Jarrett, in my opinion, was a great, great one. A guy that was really, really not talked about for a long time in Atlanta, but just performed
Yeah.
really, really well. And then, of course, it's going to come down to can they get after the passer? And again, they're not loaded at the pass rush positions, so you don't want to tire out that secondary. You want to be able to aid that secondary.
Mhm.
So for the Bears, it could be a year where it's a step up offensively, but if the defense does not take the step, basically step in step with the offense, the Bears may, be in one of those odd situations of, 8 and 9,
Mhm.
7 and 10, where it's marked improvement, but, not the improvement that necessarily is gonna punch your ticket to January.
What do you think would define a successful season for them this year?
I think just the offense growing. The
Okay.
offense just
Yeah.
growing, and, Caleb Williams, obviously, you because it is new head coach. It is Caleb
Mhm.
Williams, so this is their first dance, obviously, together. We wanna see significant growth from Caleb Williams. We wanna see, the players involved. Obviously, Rome Odunze is a big player here. The
Mhm.
Bears, you went Caleb Williams, you coulda went offensive line. They went Caleb Williams, they went Rome Odunze. You would say it was a slow start for him, but DJ Moore's always been a really good player, whether it was Carolina, whether it was the Bears. But you get to this point where Adunze, who's a different type of receiver, a little bit more bigger, physical, bigger catch radius,
Mhm.
those two work in lockstep together. Caleb Williams' game grows, exponentially under the tutelage, of course, of his new head coach. And the Bears, I don't know that I see playoffs this year, but
Mhm.
I would absolutely think we're talking about a team, that's definitely pushing towards that 7, 8. And if you told me that somehow, some way they maybe ended up with a better season than the Green Bay Packers, it wouldn't necessarily be stunned.